Things I Couldn't Tell My Mother, written and read by Sue Johnston. To my mum and dad, and my son Joel, who'll never read it. Prologue. Ina Sharples once famously said of her mother's death, "She just sat up, broke wind, and died." My mother would have definitely considered herself to be a cut above the fictitious Mrs. Sharples and her mother. But as she lay in her bed, in the home where she'd been living for the past year, she did make one last Herculean effort to sit up, reaching out to be helped. Then she sneezed, lay back in bed, and I felt the life leave her, like someone had flicked off a switch. She was 92, I was 63. These were her final moments, but the preceding weeks and even months had been long and exhausting. As I reflect now, nearly 4 years after her death, I miss her. This may seem unsurprising. Of course I should miss my mother. But things were far from plain sailing between her and me. Our relationship was often difficult and fraught. My mother began to sharply decline when I was filming Wake in the Dead. Any time that I wasn't filming, I would be making my way up the M6 to be with her. Then I received a call early in September 2007, saying she had taken a turn for the worse, and that I should get there as soon as I could. When I arrived in Warrington, my mother had rallied and was sitting up in bed, alert and ready for me. She looked me up and down in my on-screen makeup and asked scathingly, "What have you come as? You look like a bus conductress." This used to be quite a common insult when I was younger, as bus conductresses were known to wear thick pant-stick makeup. That I'd arrived to see my mum for what I thought would be the last time, only to be greeted with this, really makes me smile now. It was so typical of her. I stayed with her for a while, and then reluctantly returned to filming in London. A few days later, I had another call. The nurses said they were sure this time that this was it. On the way, I got a flat tire, but I didn't stop. I think that I knew this really was the last time I would be making the journey. Everything and nothing was going through my mind. I was very emotional, racked with anxiety and upset, tired yet wired. When I arrived at the home, my mother was lying in bed looking tiny and frail. There was no caustic put-down this time. She just looked helpless and fragile. She was awake and aware that I was there, but quiet and restful, slipping in and out of consciousness. I took her hand and vowed to stay by her side. I would remain there for the next 4 days. This time to be with my mother was a privilege that I know many people aren't afforded. And as fraught, surreal and sad as it was, I was mindful that I had the opportunity to say things to her that I might not have normally said. Over the years I have had more than one occasion to want to tell my mother exactly what I thought of her, and not all of it complimentary or pleasant. She had always been a difficult person to deal with, someone who, I'm sad to say, found it very difficult to show affection or warmth towards me. It seems strange to admit this, and yet at the same time she was my mother, and I still loved her. As close relationships in life often are, ours was complicated. My mother was obsessed with the notion of people getting ideas above their station. Having a daughter who was educated and followed her own path in life definitely fit into this category. There were many times when I just wanted her to be proud of me, but it seemed she never was. But in these, her final days, as she lay in bed and I sat in the chair next to her, I wouldn't go as far as to say that none of the things that made me angry about her didn't matter, but they certainly didn't need airing now. It seemed to me to be a time for peaceful acceptance. As she became more vulnerable, I felt things soften between us. I suppose it was because she needed me, and I was very happy to be needed and to help. With all of this time to think, with nursing staff and relatives coming and going, but me as a constant in the room with my mother, I felt I needed to say something to her, for her to hear something from me that was from my heart, something I could say with absolute honesty. I took her hand.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?